I'm going to show you snippets of two very different films. Are you ready?
So across the fields of Kent and Sussex, across the rolling downs, the fact that her course is set towards British shores is enough to seal her fate.
I guess just out of all the people that I've lost in my life, like, they were probably the most important.
In those fateful autumn days of 1940, when none knew what terror the skies might hold, there appeared from end to end of Britain the strangest fighting force the world has ever seen. An army of citizens, self-organized, self-disciplined.
Tí hôn bà ngoại có một lần thôi. Tức là khi mà bà ngoại bệnh á.
Now, what do these two films have in common? Well, they're both documentary pieces from Canada, and because of this, they in their own ways become symbols of what some may term national identity. Churchill's Island was made in 1941 and No Crying at the Dinner Table in 2019. Now, within this 78-year gap, the Canadian documentary seems to have shifted in its chosen subject, that being from a focus on the country to the people who compose it. Now, how did we get to this shift? And is this preoccupation with more specific stories pertaining to an immigrant experience more potent in creating a sense of national identity than one that traditionally focuses on a subjectivity around a country, a nation?
As new troops arrive from Canada and the other dominions to take their places on the ramparts.
Now, according to Zoe Druick in her written work, Projecting Canada, the documentary film form emerged as a state of initiative in Europe, England, and the Soviet Union in 1920, and from there reached Canada in 1939. Since the very beginning, the art was tied to a government as a form of education and information study of the population. So from here, we have three more transitions. One in the 1950s and 60s, which was more into observational docs, which, as Druick states, drew more away from the dominant authoritarian voice that characterized, those early Grierson and FB films. The second transition was in the 70s and 80s, which became more reflexive, placing a focus on the process of making the film itself. And finally, the 80s and 90s, which moved to the development of where we are now, pieces by ethnic artists who actually live within the bounds of these cultural experiences that are being depicted.
I will stop there.
To our houses,
Okay, I will
and
stop
kill
there.
us.
Can you please stop there?
I'm not
going to kill anybody, ma'am.
Well, stands, pull back.
This is how you call
They refashioned the way these stories of different cultures were made, and it really did bring scrutiny to older ethnic cultural films made by predominantly white artists, more Eurocentric artists. And in her study titled Trans-Pacific Film, Helen Lung speaks about this exact problem, where she sheds light on the absence of Asian cultural films and how many works in the 1980s and 90s were made by struggling first-generation Asian immigrants or roots-searching second- and third-generation Asians. This insight shedding light on the watering down of cultural representation, and from this, the need for more distinctly Asian narratives. Now, this argument on the shifting subjectivity brings us back to principles of great storytelling, that many great stories speak to a hyper-specific experience only when a story cuts into something unique, which holds a potential for a more nuanced interpretation, relatability. Now, Laura Marks, in her paper on intercultural cinema, studies how films possess a skin of their own, this skin being the corporality of the film itself in the way it represents a particular thing and how that comes into contact with the viewer. This contact is made through the eyes, which in this context acts as a sense of touch. This physical contact with the eyes with what is being represented is the act of touching the skin of a film. Now, everything we've discussed so far has helped ground us in understanding the strength of multicultural cinema. With this change of subject from the nation to the immigrant, we're given access to specificity. Carolinian's No Crying at the Dinner Table embodies this slow, gentle, almost hesitant effort to fight against this looming silence that is present within the film. The piece, being from an ethnic artist representing their culture, draws a parallel to the rise of ethnic artists finally using their voice to scrutinize the colonialist representations of a culture made by Eurocentric artists in the past. There's a fondness that one can appreciate in this piece because of its ability to speak to the experience of a specific cross-section in Canada, the Asian culture, yet in the same time embrace universal sentiments. Although you may not be Vietnamese, you can associate to the sentiments of the immigrant experience, where a lot of the energy which is directed to creating and building strong family ties is directed towards acquiring work and a good education to be successful and provide for the family. And we see examples of this specific experience, whether it be a mother during her sleepless nights, a father in his solemn prayer, or a daughter who, stripped in the bath, is finally letting go of layers of trauma through recollection and reflection. In the highly diverse immigrant population of Canada, there is a greater appreciation of cultural diversity, and that is what multicultural cinema aims to do, to zoom in and place a lens to a part of a whole, and through that, a richer appreciation for one's national identity.